Hello, I'm Edward Hunter and welcome to highlights from the 5th round of Season 2 of the VMS Coach Dave Delta Pro Series Platinum Split. Jerne SimGrid took his 3rd pole position of the season, but was challenged on the run into the first chicane by Marco Di Buono in the Ferrari 499P, who tried to go around the outside at the Red Avilio but was met by a robust defence from the reigning endurance champion, who held on to the lead. This was not to last, however, as Di Buono positioned himself to the outside at the Della Roggia chicane to brake late on the exterior, putting the Italian into the lead on home soil. Meanwhile, the GD3s saw a similarly action-packed start to their race as Luke Whitehead was leapfrogged from his 4th pole position of the season by Thomas Lydon, who got the better launch at the green flag in his BMW. Lydon then almost immediately blew the lead by going much too deep on the brakes and cutting the Rettifilio chicane, and he was followed off track by Marin Bessier, who then overtook Lydon when he slowed down to allow Whitehead's Ferrari back past him. Patrick Schindler was able to defend 4th from Wojciech Polesny, but Bessier cheekily refused to yield the lead, meaning Whitehead had to tuck in behind the Aston Martin through the Curva Grande to challenge into Della Roggia. The Frenchman left the door open on the inside and Whitehead died through, meaning Ferrari led both classes at the Temple of Speed. On lap 2, Whitehead found himself under attack on all fronts into the Della Roggia chicane as Bessier and Lydon tried to gang up on him from the inside and outside. Despite rubbing wheels with both drivers, crucially Whitehead held his line as Bessier was forced to cut the track, meaning the Englishman maintained the lead. Bessier's impatience then got the better of him as he clattered the curbs and went too wide into the gravel on the exit of Ascari, allowing Lydon to get the run on the Aston Martin and for the Pose driver to easily retake 2nd position. Things then got worse for the reigning GD3 contender champion, as next on the list of pursuers was Schindler, who was able to get enough overlap to muscle the black and gold Mustang around the outside of Bessier through the first chicane, and that became the inside on exit. Bessier then tried to counterattack the next lap around, but he once again broke far too late and had to cut the chicane. This time he was forced to slow down, allowing not only Schindler but Polesny and Remy Delorme past him as well. It would prove to be a difficult race for the Frenchman. 10 minutes into the race, SimGrid made an attempt to take the hypercar lead away from Di Buono around the outside at the Red Avilio, but Di Buono refused to be intimidated and the Ferrari driver went back around the outside of the Peugeot, with the pair making minor contact in the process. Mikołaj Hatrishki had decided to switch to the Toyota for the rest of the season. Running behind 3rd place Michi Hoyer, the Polish driver saw his chance when Hoyer had to run around the outside of Luca Fingard's Porsche 911 at the Parabolica. The duo had to go either side as Arda Ercan also joined the party. Hoyer held on from the Toyota by going back around the outside of Hatrishki at the Rettifilio as the pack began to get very congested behind them. Jules Neal was running 8th and trying to take advantage of Henri Gambol being stuck in traffic. The Frenchman made a late move in his Alpine as he tried to run 3 wide into Ascari with disastrous consequences. Gambol found himself in the wall and out on the spot, while Neal was spun off into the gravel, also signaling the end of his day. Fabio Grigoletto then started to get a move on, trying to steal 5th from Ercan. The number 50 Ferrari went around the outside of the 51 and pulled off a pass through the Rettifilio with only a small lockup under braking as he overwhelmed the Turkish driver. After 20 minutes, SimGrid was starting to get fed up of staring at the rear wing of Di Buono's Ferrari and was able to set up a move on him with a great exit from the Rettifilio. The Slovenian was finally able to tuck into the slipstream through Curva Grande and made a brilliant dive up the inside into Della Roggia to retake the lead of the race, bouncing over the curbs as he did so. "29 minutes in and Whitehead found himself under attack as Lydon challenged him for the GD3 lead by going around the outside on the run from Ascari into the Parabolica. But Lydon was given the cold shoulder by the Ferrari Esports driver, who was not about to make things easy for him. The sheer grunt of the BMW allowed Leiden to pull back alongside, but Whitehead's Ferrari held the inside and outbraked the pole into the first chicane at the Rettifilo, narrowly fending him off. Leiden then saw a small gap through the Curva Grande and went for it, but his attempt to go around the outside at Della Roggia was met by Whitehead feeding him onto the curb. A brief dip into the gravel created another opening for Leiden though, who made an audacious move down the inside of Whitehead into the two Lesmos as the two ran side by side, but it was Leiden who boldly snatched a lead from the Brit. Unfortunately, one snap of oversteer coming out of Parabolica undid all of Leiden's hard work, forcing him to defend into the Rettifilo. Whitehead was more confident on the brakes and controlled the inside line, forcing Leiden to back out or taste the gravel, as Schindler rapidly closed on the two leaders. Meanwhile, Grigoletto had cleared Kutrishki's Toyota before quickly turning his attention to the similar number 50 Ferrari of Michi Hoyer for third into the first chicane, as the reigning hypercar champion began to really struggle. 34 minutes in, Mikołaj Kutrishki passed Hoyer for fourth as the German desperately tried to conserve virtual energy for later in the race. Sven Gielhed had a wild slide on the brakes into turn 1, before Hoyer then had a huge moment of his own at Lesmo 2, allowing the Dutchman to breeze through uncontested on the run towards Ascari. Remy Delorme was the first driver to pit from 6th in the GD3 order. With 18 minutes left to go, Simoncic pitted from the hypercar lead, along with Grigoletto, Gielhed, Erchan and Daniele Farinelli. Then Whitehead, Leiden, Bessier and Michel Rodriguez pit. Bessier's race began to completely unravel when he got a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane. A lap later, De Buono, Hoyer and Kutrishki pit. Hoyer decided to take a short stop, underfueling his virtual energy to leapfrog De Buono, as Grigoletto also used the undercut to jump his fellow countryman, emerging narrowly behind Hoyer. Schindler and Prendergast then pitted from the GD3 lead with 15 minutes remaining. Grigoletto was still challenging for second and made a bold move up the inside of Hoyer into the Parabolica as the German's strategy began to backfire. Kutrishki was under pressure from Gielhed in the fight for 5th and took a shortcut across the Rettifilo chicane, meaning he then had to slow down and sacrifice 5th to the yellow Ferrari. Wojciech Polesny finally pit from the GD3 lead with 13 minutes left on the clock, emerging 4th, but unfortunately he too sped in the pit lane, having to serve a drive-through of his own, a very costly mistake for the championship leader. Marco De Buono was now eager to get back on the hypercar podium, but an attempt to outbrake Hoyer at the Rettifilo was scuppered by the Mustang of Schindler, who boxed the Italian in, allowing Hoyer to hold on for at least one more lap. With 11 minutes to go, De Buono made another attempt to clear Hoyer for third, before immediately outbraking himself into the first chicane, narrowly avoiding Grigoletto and having to reluctantly allow Hoyer back through. Niklaus Huben, championship leader in hypercar, had qualified low down the order, but now he saw his moment to attack Mikołaj Kutrishki's Toyota, positioning himself to the outside into Parabolica. Huben was late on the brakes and almost made the move work, but for Thomas Leiden's BMW appearing at exactly the wrong moment, allowing the duel to continue as they ran side by side down the start-finish straight. They were still alongside each other by the time they reached the Rettifilo, with Huben trying to take the inside on exit and making contact with the Toyota as they ran side by side through the Curva Grande and into Della Roggia. Huben then completed the move as Kutrishki got a tap at the rear from Arda Erchan. With 6.5 minutes remaining, De Buono lost the back end into the Parabolica, allowing Gielhed to slot his yellow Ferrari ahead into 4th place. On the following lap, Gilhead got onto the podium by slipstreaming his way up the inside of Hoyer into Ascari. De Buono almost immediately followed Gilhead through on the exit of Ascari. 2 minutes from the end, Schindler had caught up to Leiden in the battle for second in GD3, and a mistake for the BMW driver as he suddenly slowed on the exit from the Red Aphilio allowed the German to power through in his Ford Mustang as he now sought to challenge Whitehead for race victory. With 90 seconds to go, Hoyer found himself dangerously low on fuel and got a poor exit from the Parabolica. Niklaus Huben took full advantage to pounce up the inside on the start-finish line to claim 5th. Meanwhile, right behind them, Petrushki was defending 7th from Erchan's Ferrari. With Hoyer now having to lift and coast, he was forced to let Petrushki through at Ascari in a wild sideways moment. Then it was Erchan's turn, as he attempted to go around the outside of Hoyer through the Parabolica and looked to initially have pulled it off until he went far too wide and had to let him back through. As they started the final lap, Daniele Farinelli had caught the back of them and was starting to weave around the rearview mirrors, but then Erchan braked late around the outside of Hoyer to snatch 7th position at the Red Aphilio on the final lap. Into Della Roggia, it was Farinelli's turn to pass Hoyer, who could offer no resistance, with no fuel or energy left remaining. Simoncic, though, came through to take a superb and long-awaited first victory of the season, and was mercifully able to lap all of the GD3 leaders on the final lap, much to the relief and delight of a dangerously low-on-fuel Whitehead, who also sealed his first victory for Ferrari Esports in front of a delighted Tifosi. The action didn't end there though, as Erchan was held up at Ascari by the Porsche of Vingard, allowing Farinelli to opportunistically launch up the inside and snatch 7th on the run towards Parabolica. As the two Ferraris battled for position, Petrushki had to lift and coast into the final corner of the race, and suddenly 6th was up for grabs. Farinelli attempted to make it 3 overtakes on the final lap by going around the outside, but the reigning Hypercar Contender champion got on the power early, and it was a drag race to the line as Petrushki marginally held on. So Simoncic takes Peugeot's first victory, 3.5 seconds clear of Grigoletto. Gilhead fought his way through the pack to 3rd as De Buono had to settle for 4th after a strong start to the race. Huben also recovered up to 5th but lost crucial ground to his 2 main title rivals. Petrushki took his first top 6 after a switch to the Toyota. Farinelli's late charge season takes 7th ahead of Erchan, whilst a disappointed Hoyer was left down in 9th as Paul Lepere secured the final point behind him. Henrik Gamble and Jules Neal both failed to finish after crashing into each other, and Neal is still seeking his first points of the season. In GD3, Whitehead finally converted pole to victory, beating the ever-consistent Schindler by only a second, with Leiden following closely behind in 3rd. Prendergast was another 7 seconds adrift in 4th. Delorme and Rodriguez took their best results of the season in 5th and 6th. Fabien Ballet was 7th. Wojtek Polesny was a bitterly disappointed 8th. Bessier was a similarly crestfallen 9th, and Luca Fingard came home to secure the final points-paying position in 10th. In the hypercar standings, Fabio Grigoletto now takes the overall lead, with Simoncic up to 2nd, just a point ahead of Huben. Gilhead is 4th on 59 points, then it's Marco De Buono 5th, James Baldwin falling down to 6th, Arda Erchan is 7th with Michi Hoyer in 8th, Joe McCauley is down to 9th, and Henrik Gamble rounds out the top 10. In the GD3 standings, Patrick Schindler now takes the overall lead 6 points ahead of Wojtek Polesny, as Whitehead now moves just a point ahead of his fellow countryman Kieran Prendergast. In 5th is Timotej Andonovski, who loses a bit of ground. Thomas Leiden is back up to 6th, just a point ahead of Sebastian Wunsch. Marin Bessier is still in 8th ahead of Remy Delorme, and Michel Rodriguez rounds out the top 10.